trying to have fun, but I don't really have a purpose. And so if anybody should have known the answer when here in Ecclesiastes, I have a hard time saying Ecclesiastes. I wish there was another word I could call it, but we'll call it that. But anyhow, here King Solomon, he talks about some of those negative results when you have no purpose. But if anybody knew the answer, it should have been him. I mean, he had it all. King Solomon had money, more than he could ever spend. He had possessions, more than he could ever enjoy. He had wives, more than he could ever please. There he had a bunch of those. And he had wisdom far greater than anybody else of his day. He had it all. And yet, for a part of the time in his life, now I honestly think that in Ecclesiastes, and I don't know this to be true, but I think maybe he's looking back at a time when he wasn't walking with God. I think he's back walking with God while he's writing this. But for a time in his life, he didn't have any real grasp on the purpose why he was here. He had all those things, but he didn't have no real grasp of it. And that's what we're going to find here in the book of Ecclesiastes. And here's what I've found is I studied this, and I studied it about 10 or 15 years ago. I tried to go through some things and study it. And here's what I always find, that everybody disagrees. I read different scholars, different pastors, different writers, and they disagree on just about everything. And from who the author is, and that's what to me is strange, but some disagree on who the author is, to the message of it, to its point of view, to the key words in it, some people don't even think it belongs in the Bible. But to be honest with you, when I read all their arguments, most of them, I'm not smart enough to figure out what they was trying to say. And so they're way over my head. I thought, well, I don't need any of that stuff. But because I believe God's still in charge of things, and I say it belongs in the Bible because he got it there. If it didn't belong in there, he'd have kept it out. So it does belong in the Bible. It is the Word of God. And since it's the Word of God, here's what I believe about it. It's profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, that the man of God may be perfect, thoroughly furnished unto all good works. But let me tell you, it's not easy to understand. And in some places, it's even harder to stomach. It's pretty tough. If you're looking for easy answers, if you're looking for stories that really build you up, this is not the book for you. You have to go somewhere else. One fellow said it this way. He said, it's not Jell-O. It's more like beef jerky. You try to eat it all at once, it'll choke you. And you got to chew on it a little bit. And it takes some effort. It takes some patience. And I don't want you to think I've mastered the book, because I'm still trying to figure it out. But for some reason, I've always been fascinated by this book. I've always loved it. Didn't understand a lot of it. Still don't understand a lot of it, but there's just a lot of things in here I've always liked. And so if I could, I'd like to come back around every so many years and preach it again if the God would allow me. But one man said this about it. It says, Ecclesiastes bears the stamp of divinity. Like God himself, it both pulls you in and pushes you away at the same time. It mocks the scholar, daring him to find the depths of its mystery, then laughing at him when he gets it all wrong and gives up in despair. So I think, if it pushes you away, the know-it-all. And I thought I was thinking about, I'll not get into that because somebody get after me. But if it pushes you, if you're a know-it-all, and I know people, and you know people like this, if you got a question, they got all the answers. Well, that's the type of person who stays away from Ecclesiastes. It pushes away. But I'll tell you what else it does. It invites those who are real disciples, those who want to learn from the Lord. It invites us to kind of sit down with an older and wiser man here and learn what he's learned. Learn what Solomon, the Bible says, was the wisest of all of them. And he said, I've got some things to tell you here. And he's telling us from a life that's went through the observation. Not just somebody that, sometimes you hear a preacher stand and tell things, but he really has no practical. I'm glad to tell you, when I tell you about a lot of different sins today, I've not practiced them. I can see what they do in others' life, but I've not practiced them. Solomon practiced a lot of them. When he says what these things do to you, he practiced some of these things. And so he doesn't know everything, but he's always honest, and he tries to point us in the right direction in this book. We'll read it. And Martin Luther, he urged his friends, he says, read this noble little book every day, because it knocks the sentimentality and the religious cant out of us. He said it keeps us from becoming silly and phony and saccharine sweet. So I'd say tonight, us soft-headed Christians, we need this. And so do hard-hearted unbelievers. They need this book. Most of the people that you know, and most of the people that I know, are looking for satisfaction and fulfillment, but many in the wrong places. Now, some of those things are obviously wrong, like drugs, drinking. People can figure that out. But you know, a lot of people are looking for satisfaction in things that are not wrong. They're looking for satisfaction in things like marriage, like children, like their career, fitness, sports, study, poetry, things like that. These are all gifts of God. And the preacher, I like this, he calls himself the preacher here. He recommends them to us a lot in this book, but they're not enough. All those things are wonderful. Families, wonderful. Kids are wonderful. Studies, wonderful. All that's good, but it's not enough. And that's what he's telling us here. A French philosopher once said it this way. He says, there's a God-shaped hole in our hearts, and nothing fills it but God himself. That's the message of Ecclesiastes. It's not announced from heaven. God doesn't declare it himself. No, this preacher found it out by living it. By living in this world through a long and very tedious life of trial and error, and he made a lot of errors. I often tell people, watch what other people do wrong and learn from that. I don't want to have to go through things. If I can find out it's wrong by watching you go through it, I'll learn from you. And I used to pick on my brother and sister, and I used to thank them for all the whippings they got when they was young, because every time I'd see them get one, I'd say, you know what, I don't think I want to try what they're doing right there, because that's not worth it. And so that's sort of what we ought to do, but Solomon went through all the trials and all the errors and did everything wrong, but it kind of adds a little texture to it. If someone's been through things and they tell you, this doesn't work, this is not good for you, we have a tendency to listen then. And so, but to hear it, we got to have our ears tuned up. They got to be on key. That means we need Jesus, because why? Here's what the Bible says. The hearing ear and the seeing eye, the Lord hath made even both of them. So here it starts with the author's title here in verse number 1. What's it say? I don't know. Is this thing working behind me? Well, okay, we're working. Good. Who is this author? Well, he says he's the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Now, again, I read different things, and I actually read less than I used to read, because I used to get about 7 or 8 different things on one, and so many people have different opinions, so many things I read. When I got ready to put together a sermon or something, I was too confused to do it. So I've cut down on some of them, but I have read several things on this, and scholars differ on how they say his title is. Some say he's a preacher, some say he's a teacher, some say he's a rabbi, a philosopher, a sage. What is he? Well, to my thinking, I don't think it really makes any difference what he is. He calls himself the preacher. I kind of like that, and I call myself that sometimes. But here's a man that's got something to say, and I think we do well to hear him. Some of you saying right now, well, preacher, why don't you get to what he's saying? Quit saying what you're saying. Well, I'll get there in a minute. But here's what I'm thinking. If he's the preacher, then we're the church. If he's the teacher, then we're the students. Or if he's the father, then we're the children. But after naming himself the preacher, he goes on and he adds the son of David, king in Jerusalem. And that's why most people say that Solomon wrote this. I believe that Solomon wrote it. I'm not smarter than most people. I just read enough that I'm pretty sure Solomon wrote it. But he had it all. He had money, he had fame, he had wisdom, he had women, he had good taste, he had power, he had long life, but he still wasn't satisfied. And that's what he's getting across. He said, I want you to know there was a time in my life I had everything that all you people was looking for, and it didn't satisfy me. I wasn't doing very good with it. And he probably would have signed the agreement with St. Augustine's. That some of his most remembered words was this: Lord, thou hast made us for thyself, and our souls are restless till they find their rest in thee. So he's the preacher, and he's a writer. And then verse 2 gives us a theme. And it's kind of seems like it's kind of a bleak summary of it, but here's what he says: vanity of vanities, saith the preacher. Vanity of vanity, all is vanity. I think there's somewhere over 30 times that shows up here in this book in key places. And so I don't think we're going to get anywhere understanding the book of Ecclesiastes until we get a little feel for the word. And so I started reading what people say about it, because I know what I think of when I use the word vanity and in vain and such as that. And again, I said a while ago, scholars are split on different things, but here's some of the things they put in there. They put meaningless, means absurd, futile, nothing, illusory, frustrating, fleeting, and I think there's something good about all those things they said, but the one I prefer would be the word vapor. That's what it means in most places when it's used, this word vanity, be like vapor. And so the preacher is comparing to life under the sun. When I say life under the sun, I'm talking about just life on earth with God left out. Trying to make your way, trying to enjoy life, and leaving God out. What's he compared to? He says like vapor like steam or smoke or a fog. Think of steam when it comes up. If you coffee drinkers, think about that steam. Think about when you went out this morning and you breathe, you can see your breath. Or worse yet, when you got up this morning, you could see your breath in the house. That's even worse. But think of the smoke coming out of your chimney, or that early, if you live somewhere close to a large body of water, something bigger than Cataract Lake, they've got the big fog that comes up on some mornings, and it takes for a while for it to go away. And what have they got in common with each other, and what have they got in common with life? What is it? I'll tell you, here's what I think it is. You can't control them, and you can't hang on to them. They're gone. I thought about when I was a kid, my dad used to have a lot of friends that smoked. They'd come there. For some reason, if you smoke, you have to learn to blow smoke rings. And I didn't think I'd ever be talented enough, so I never did take up smoking. I've done pretty good on that. But I watch people that blow smoke rings, but I've never seen anybody catch one. And what some of probably the ladies in here more than the men, they love Starbucks. Now I don't know why that is. I don't know why I don't drink coffee at all, but for some reason, just regular black coffee like most people drink, or most people used to drink, that's like a sin. It's a curse. So you go to Starbucks and you pay 10 times what things are. For as much as you pay for a coffee at Starbucks, you ought to get the steam to go with it. It ought to be yours. You ought to be able to, next time the steam comes up out of the cup, you ought to be able to put it in a jar somewhere and keep it. And maybe a couple hours later, I want some of that. I want to smell that. But you can't do it. It's not there. You can't keep that. It has a way of getting away from our bed. It just eludes us. It gets away. And what's true of smoke and what's true of steam is true of life. You can't control it, and you can't keep it. Life is a gift that God gives us. And it's taken away at God's leisure, not ours. We don't decide. It's not our choice. In fact, that's what he says in verse 8. There is no man, in chapter 8, verse 8, there is no man that hath power over the Spirit to retain the Spirit. Neither hath he power in the day of death. Now, that's not something unique that's said here in the book of Ecclesiastes. It's all over the Bible. In fact, here, I'll give you a couple examples. Proverbs 27, boast not thyself of tomorrow, for thou knowest not what a day may bring forth. James 4 says, for what is your life? It is even a vapor that appeareth for a little time and then vanishes away. And I think to myself, probably every family in here has got one of those phone calls from one time or another. Late at night, someone has died. Someone that you really thought was going to live a lot longer than you did. Someone who was younger and young and healthy, and you thought they'd be around a long time, but they're not. They're gone. You see, if life can't be controlled and held on to, then neither can the things in our life. The things that we enjoy, the things that we don't enjoy, none of them's controllable, none of them's secure. And this, now again, Ecclesiastes, it could be a tough book to read. It could be a tough book, but I don't want us to think of it as a downer book. I think there's a lot of things in here to see, but he's very honest. I mean, a man works hard, and what happens? They downsize. He loses his job. A lady, she's a fine wife, and then up one day her husband says, I'm leaving. I'm going somewhere else. I'm out of here. People eat right, and they exercise, and they go to the doctor, and they still get terrible diseases. Some of you in here have had every vaccine that you know since they started this COVID stuff, and you've had COVID more than anybody else. That's just, those things happen. And people have the best parents. They have prodigal sons. I mean, I often use the example, but Adam and Eve, they raised their kids in the same family, same environment, same everything. But one of them was a pretty bad kid. Killed his brother. You have prodigal sons. It happens. And the safest investments, they get lost sometimes. They go under. And the strongest minds, some of the people you knew, they end up with Alzheimer's, dementia, things like that. And I was thinking years ago, I remember I wasn't real young, but it was a couple years before my dad died. I'll think of her name here in a minute. I wrote it down here so I wouldn't forget her name, and I've already forgot it. I don't see her name. Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis. Somebody remember her? What she said was kind of amazing. She found out she had breast cancer, and here was her statement. Why do I do all those push-ups? What was she saying? I've done so good to take care of myself. I mean, she had money. She was one of the wealthiest, married to one of the wealthiest men in the world, and she had some of the finest things that money could buy. And she was fairly young. She had taken very good care of herself, and what she was doing. What was she doing? Well, she's doing what we're all doing. What Solomon says, laboring for the wind. So Solomon's the writer. Now, some of you think, preacher, what is this? Well, it's a little different type of sermon. It's a little different type thing, but it's an interesting book. He's the preacher. He calls himself the preacher. So all through this, I'm going to call him the preacher because it's easy to remember his name. And what his theme is, pretty well, life down here is vanity. If you're without God, life is vanity. There's nothing really to it. And so his conclusion, in fact, I'm getting ahead of myself, after a lot of years of just reflecting on life the way it really is, he's come up with this conclusion. In verse 3, he says, what profit hath a man in all his labor which he taketh under the sun? Now, he puts it in the form of a question, but what he's saying is the answer, really. He's kind of got it and turned around. What he's saying is, there is no profit. Nothing. There's no profit in all your work down here under the sun. All your work outside of for God, there's no profit. There's nothing to be gained. And Job said this, says, naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. So, but then I think about this. On the surface, he's got this wrong. I mean, is that really true? Most intelligent, hardworking, and focused students, they're going to get their diploma. They're going to get their degree. I mean, you get into school and you work at it. It's not for nothing. You get those diplomas. You get those things. Most people who are very disciplined and shrewd and a good investor, they're going to make money on their investments. I'm not one of them. That's why I give my $4 to a fellow to put it in there for me, and I'm up to $6 now, so I'm doing pretty good. And but the Bible seems to even put its approval on common sense, on this common sense observation. In fact, it says in Proverbs 10, he becometh poor that dealeth with the slack hand, but the hand of the diligent maketh rich. So God says you're diligent, you do what you ought to do, it'll help you. So I read it and I think, well, which is it? Is the ends and the means, are they related? Are they working together? Somehow they connected? And is there some positive relationship between, let's say, how hard you study and the grades you get? Well, I have to say, yes, there is. There must be some profit to our efforts to make a living or to stay healthy or to have a good family and so on. You put the effort into stuff, there has to be some profit to it. And I don't think the preacher here is trying to deny that. What he's saying is there's no certainty to it. You can't guarantee it. You can't guarantee you do all that and you're going to get a good grade. You can't guarantee all this. I mean, the chances are, the chances are much better. I tell people often, if you're saved and if there was no such thing as God and we made all this up, but you live a clean life and stay away from drugs and alcohol and all that, you'll probably still live better than most people. You'll probably be healthier. There's a good chance, but I can't guarantee it. I can't say it's so. And so he's saying there's no certainty, and here's the other thing, there's no permanence to it. All those things may happen. There's no permanence to that profit. Paul calls money uncertain riches. Jesus warns us and tells us the finest wardrobes can be eaten by moths, and the shiniest of metals can be tarnished. And he reminds us that there's no home that's safe or bank or portfolio that people can't break into it. There's somebody can get through it. Every day, I don't know if you ever get it, but they're always saying, oh, your debit card's been compromised, so I take my $6 and put it on another debit card. And they're going to get it one of these days before I get it moved over, but that's what they're trying. But I thought of even closer to home, there used to be a day when you really, you could buy stuff and you just hardly ever, think about all the foreclosures you see in this day we live. What's happened? Well, you can lose. I mean, it does happen. But even if you could keep everything safe in this life, and even if it was guaranteed for life, how long is that? 5 years? 50 years? 5 minutes? We don't know, and you can't take it with you. In death, everything that you've gained under the sun, everything you've gained here in this world outside of God is lost. You say, I've got 5 cars. What are you going to do with them? They're not going with you. Somebody else is going to get them. He talks about that later on. And so everything is lost. And so then he kind of gives us the proof here in the last part of this. No matter how hard you try to prevent it, the preacher here is proving his point by reminding us several things that we know. I mean, everybody knows it, but we don't think about it lately. Here's what he says in verse 4. One generation passes away, and another generation cometh, but the earth abideth forever. What's that mean, preacher? Well, this old human race, we're made out of dirt. And for a few years, we control the dirt. But eventually, dirt gets us, we go back to dirt. That's where we're going. What's the Bible say in Genesis? For dust thou art, and unto dust thou shalt return. That's our predicament. Now, we can fret about that, and we can worry about that, or we can just face it. That's part of life, but it doesn't matter because I got a better home waiting for me. But he's talking about life under the sun. He's talking about life outside of all of that. And so that's our predicament. No matter how long or how hard we fight, dirt's going to win. We're going to lose to dirt one day. He says in verse 5, the sun also arises, and the sun goeth down, and hasteth to its place where he rose. Now, there's nothing any busier than the sun. This sun, it comes up every day. It never takes a day off. Now, you may not see it because the clouds may be doing pretty good work on that day, but it's there every day. It never calls in sick. It never sleeps late. But for all of its rising and for all of its setting, it never gets anywhere. Every day at noon, you want to look, and the sun is overhead. Every day in the morning, it's in the east. Every day in the evening, it's in the west. It does all this work and never gets anywhere, back where it was. And the biggest and the most powerful force in our galaxy is like a hamster on a treadmill. It's always on the move, not getting anywhere. There's the sun, just going in circles. But then you go a little farther. What about the wind? Verse 6, the wind goeth toward the south, and turneth about unto the north. It whirleth about continually, and the wind returneth again according to its circuits. What about rivers? No different. They're always running into the ocean. But verse 7 says, all the rivers run to the sea, yet the sea's not full. Unto the place from whence the rivers come, thither they return again. I read this and I think to myself, you know, these people that are pushing so many things about we're going to destroy this earth and we're going to do this. Well, I think maybe someday when I read the Bible and I see all the things that how the earth's going to be destroyed by fire and different things, in my mind, I think someday somebody's going to push that nuclear button. And it's going to bring a big fire. It's going to do a lot of that. But I don't know if that's what it means or not. But I do know this. All these things that they're saying is doing this, and the car emissions and all that, God's still in charge of things. He can handle all those things. But here he's saying here the sea, it doesn't get full. Have you ever thought about that? Think about all the oceans or all the rivers that's running. I mean, look at the Mississippi River, and it's running down there and runs into the Gulf. How come the Gulf doesn't run over? Where's it all going? It goes right back. That's what he says. And then he turns from the tedious routines of nature here, and the preacher turns on us, on our lives. And here's what he's got to say about him. He says, all things are full of labor. Man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing it, nor the ear filled with hearing. The thing that hath been, it is that which shall be. And that which is done is that which shall be done. And there is no new thing under the sun. Is there anything whereof it may be said, see, this is new? It hath already been of old time, which was before. There's no remembrance of former things, neither shall there be any remembrance of things that are to come with those that shall come after. Now, he's talking about us now. We're a whole lot smaller than the sun and the rivers and the winds and all that. But our lives are not much different than them. That's what he's saying. He said, most days, I don't know about you, but most days is just ordinary days. And that's where a lot of times we get in trouble as Christians. We're looking for the spectacular all the time. But most of your life is going to be normal. It's just, we talked about it a few weeks ago. It's pretty much the same thing. And if you think about it, we're not really getting anywhere. Think about this, taking care of your house or your yard. Now, I've not been to third world countries, but I was told by someone from the Philippines that this is a little different over there. We really work on getting our yard cleaned up and mowed and trimmed and all that. They don't even mess with it over there. They just let it grow. I don't know if that's the way it is or not, but think about this. We go out and we mow our yard and we trim the lawn and it looks great. What about 5 days later? It needs to be done again. What am I saying? We're not getting nowhere. What did we accomplish? Nothing. You ladies, you go in, you cook a great meal, and it tastes great. What happens about 5 hours later? I sit down and say, are we going to eat anything for supper tonight? I mean, that lunch is gone. I need something else here. And that's the way it is. And you wash a load of laundry, and it smells so good, and the next day you get up, and there's all the clothes baskets full. Now, I don't know how we do this. There's 2 of us in our house. In the past, we had 1 trash can, and it was full every day. And I couldn't figure out how we got it full. I don't remember doing that much stuff. But it was full every day. We're in a big house now. We've got 2 trash cans right there together. Do you know the other day, both them things got filled in one day, and I don't even know what we did. I don't know how we do it. I mean, everything, it just goes in circles like that. And so, and I think probably I myself, I admire folks that are, their title would be homemakers. That's a very difficult job. I admire those folks, but not everybody does. Some people, if that's your responsibility, that's your job, they look down at you like that, and as though it's just a dull life every day. What you do is a dull life, but you know what? I think maybe they ought to look at themselves. Are they really any different? Are people any different than? I mean, don't security guards, don't they pretty well do the same thing every day? We got a fellow here. He works double shifts, and it's the same thing every day. We just do it. Or how about doctors? Same thing. Attorneys, singers, professional athletes. I listened to Tiger Woods the other day, and he said, now this was when he was younger, he was saying he hits at least 1,000 shots every day of some kind. He said it may be putts, but at least I hit the golf ball at least 1,000 times. I don't think I can do that, but I'd like to try, to be honest with you. But I'm saying that's it. And some of them are higher paying and a little bit more romantic treadmills than others, but they're all just treadmills. We're just doing the same old things. And people who think they're doing something really new, they're just doing a variation of something that's already been around. How about computer? These people, they call them computer nerds today. I mean, they can deliver information. And it's amazing how fast they can deliver it, and it's amazing how accurate they can be. But didn't librarians used to do that? Maybe a little bit slower, but they just relayed information. You go back a little bit farther, the old tribal elders sitting there around the fire, they just relaying information to people. It's nothing new, it's just different. It's a different method. So what's he saying? There's nothing new under the sun. Well, I don't know how far we've got tonight. We're going to be about done here in a minute. So, but what do we do with life? Here's what he says in verse 2. He said, it's vanity of vanities, saith the preacher. All is vanity. If I can't control life and I can't hold on to it, what do I do with it? Well, some people reading in the book of Ecclesiastes will say, preacher, we wring our hands and we worry and we fret and we despair of life and we're just all a mess. But that's not what the preacher's counsel is. As you read through the whole book, and I don't have all the sermons that I'm going to be preaching yet, but I've read what he says in here, and he says some good things. But what he tells us to do with our short and uncertain lives, really, I find 4 things in this book, and we're going to get to them all. Fear God. Number 1, just fear God. Number 2, keep his commandments. Do what he says. Pretty smart thing. Number 3, enjoy his gifts. I mean, we just talked about all these things that marriage and life and kids and all that. Those are all gifts from God. Enjoy the things that God's given us in this life. And again, the preacher tells us all through here to do that. But then he says, then just wait for God to set things straight. We get fretted about things going on, but God's going to set everything straight one of these days. He's still in charge of it, and he's going to. So we can't control our lives, but we can trust the Lord who does control our life. And we can't live forever, but I can believe in Jesus, who is the resurrection and the life. And so in Ecclesiastes chapter 12 and verse 13, and I'll finish with this verse, he says this, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. See how easy life is if we just do what the Bible says. I don't have to fret about things. I don't have to worry about things. I can't control it anyhow, so why not just trust God? Just do what he says and keep walking with him. Let him be in charge. He's not going to make mistakes. We sing a song, he maketh no mistake, and he doesn't. So I'm going to trust him. I'm going to follow him. And in the meantime, you come back, and if the Lord helps us, we'll try to see some more things from the book of Ecclesiastes. A difficult book, but I find it a very interesting book, and so I hope he'll allow us to do some more thoughts from there. Would you bow with me for prayer? Father, we love you today. Thank you again for your word. God, thank you for Solomon and his wisdom. That God, he was a long ways from perfect. He probably messed up more